Welcome to the final section in this module. And in this section, I'm going to introduce a new idea. And this idea is something called a variable. Now, a variable is a letter that is simply known as like a placeholder. That'll make more sense as we work through some examples. What exactly does placeholder even mean? And typically, variables are unknown values in expressions or equations. So typically, we see a variable which is a letter. So I'm gonna have a highlighter option here. I'm going to highlight letter. So we know a variable is a letter, right? And typically, variables are unknown values in expressions or equations that require algebra and other things to find a value. But you're in luck, because in this section, the variables are going to have designated values. So we're just going to be given a value, and all we have to do is plug in this value and for wherever this variable happens to be. So all we're doing is order of operations. That's all we're doing. But I'm introducing this idea of a variable. So in this first example, we are given that x equals 2. And we want to simplify this following expression here. So if x equals 2, all we have to do is plug in 2 wherever x is, and that happens to be there. So we have x minus 7 squared, so we're going to replace that x with 2. So really, we're just going to do 2 minus 7 squared. And using order of operations, we have to do exponents first. So we have 2 minus 7 squared is 49. So we have 2 minus 49. And that happens to be negative 47. And then looking at example 2, we are given that y equals 8, and we are given the expression y squared minus 2y. So we're going to plug in 8 wherever we see y. So we have y squared, so we're going to replace that y with an 8 and square it. And then we're going to subtract 2 and then multiply that 2 by y. And y is 8. So now we have this exponent. So we have an exponent. So we're going to do that first. And we don't have any parentheses. So 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. And then we're going to subtract 2 times 8. And 2 times 8 is 16. So we get 64 minus 16. Which happens to be 48. Looking at example 3, we're given 2 variables now, but that's not going to change anything. All we're going to do is substitute in these variables for their values. So we're given that a equals 2 and z equals negative 2. So I'm going to box a, let me do a better job of that. So I'm going to box a, I'm going to underline z. So wherever there's an a, I'm going to put a box around it. So we have an a here. We have a z here, so I'm going to underline that z. And then we have an a here, and then we have a z here. So since we have an a here, I'm going to write that as 2. And then we're going to subtract, and we have a negative, and then z is negative 2. So we're at negative 2. It's got a lot of negatives. It's okay. We've dealt with negatives before we got this. And then we're going to do all of that cubed. Because we have this cubed here. And then we're going to divide that by a over z. And a is 2, and z is negative 2. So now let's use order of operations. So let's simplify what's within these parentheses here. And then we can also simplify this 2 over negative 2 while we're at it in the first step. So we have 2 minus, and we have 2, or we have negative, we have a negative times negative, because you can think of this as like a negative 1. So these become a positive. So we really have 2 minus 2, because this 2 becomes a positive. We have 2 minus 2, and then we're going to cube that. And then 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. And then from here, we're going to subtract 2 minus 2, which is 0. So we have 0 cubed, or 0 to the third power, over negative 1. And anything 0 raised to any power is always 0, because 0 cubed, that equals 0 times 0 times 0. And as we know, anytime we multiply 0 by anything, or 0 by itself, we just get 0. So this expression simply equals 0 with these values. Okay. So now let's work with this one. So we are given three values. So one of them, let's underline k. Let's circle n, and let's box x. So we can underline k. We have an n, so we're going to circle it. We have an x, so we're going to give that a box. And then we have another k, so we're going to underline it. So let's write this k out. Let's write this k out in front. And k is 1/2. So we're going to write 1. That makes you write it over here. So we have 1/2 out in front. And then we're going to multiply this entire thing by 1/2. And in the numerator, we have the absolute value of n plus x. So n is 7. So we're going to do 7 plus, and then x is negative 10. And then we're going to put that over 4 times k, which is 1/2. Let me go like this. And then we're going to square that entire value. So let's start doing some order of operations. So we're going to simplify what is in parentheses here first. So, and to first do that, we're going to simplify the numerator and the denominator before we divide out whatever this happens to be. So we have 7 plus negative 10, and in other words, that's 7 minus 10. And 7 minus 10 is going to be negative 3. So we're going to put that in the numerator, and then we're going to divide that. Well, hold on. Can't forget those absolute value bars. So we have the absolute value of negative 3. Absolute value of negative 3. And then here, we're going to simplify what's in these parentheses before we square it. So looking at this, we can write this as 4 over 1. And then we can cross reduce here and divide by these. We can divide both 4 and 2 by 2. So we're going to have 2 divided by 2, which is 1. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we have 2 times 1 and 1 times 1. That's a crooked 1. Let me erase that here. There you go. Okay. So we know 2 times 1 is 2. And then 1 times 1 is 1. So in other words, we just have 2. Because 2 divided by 1 is 2. So we have 2 squared. So simplifying that more, we have 1/2. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And then 2 squared is going to be 4. So now all we have to do is multiply these fractions together. So we can't cross-reduce anything because we have a 1 and a 4 and a 2 and a 3. So there's no numbers that can divide evenly into each other besides 1 and 4, but dividing 4 divided by 1 isn't going to simplify anything. So we can't cross-reduce, so we're just going to do 1 times 3, which is 3, and 2 times 4, which is 8. And that is your final answer.